Hello everyone and welcome to episode 88 of Generation GC. You Don't Mean Anything, a song by Simple Plan, and it features Joel Madden. This song is from Simple Plan's first album, No Pads, No Helmets, Just Balls, which just turned 20 years old. Wow. My guest today is Ashleigh Lee. Last time we talked about sex on the radio from Cardiology, and on our next episode we'll be talking about a song from Youth Authority. Ashleigh's academic and professional background is in journalism and marketing. She recently finished her master's degree in integrated marketing, and she's now working on a PhD in sports studies. She's also a freelance concert photographer, and while life without concerts has been difficult, she's found this time to be a wonderful chance to reflect on herself and rediscover the music she loved growing up. Ashleigh discovered GC when she was in middle school. She was obsessed with Simple Plan, so pretty natural that GC was also heavy in rotation. On a very related note to this episode, you may have seen on the internet that Simple Plan has just announced their sixth album, Harder Than It Looks. It's going to be coming out May 6th. They just put out a new single, congratulations. I'm going to add that to the playlist, so definitely check that out. I know a lot of you Good Charlotte fans are Simple Plan fans too. I have been looking forward to doing this episode basically since I started this show. I knew this was going to come. It was a lot of fun. I'm really happy it's out. As a heads up, I did want to give a content warning that there are mentions of sexual harassment in this episode. I'm sure many of you have heard about what happened with Simple Plan's former bass player, David DeRosier. So that is something we discuss. I think it's an important discussion. I'm going to leave some resources in the comments, but I hope you know that if that's something, if you have to skip over that section of the episode, that's completely okay. Join us later on, finish the episode, or if you have to come back next week, that's just fine. It's not a big focus of the episode, but it is an important conversation, and I thought it was important for Ashleigh and I to address it. I also wanted to say I love having guests from all around the world and from all different backgrounds on Generation GC. If English isn't your first language, that's okay. As long as you're comfortable holding a conversation in English, then we're good to go. And different backgrounds doesn't just mean location or ethnicity. It means ensuring a very gender and sexuality representation and representing fans of different ages and fans with your own unique life experiences of any sort. I really want to make sure that everyone who listens to the show feels like they are represented, and I really want the people who come on this show to be people who want to be on this show, who are excited to talk about Good Charlotte. So seriously, I say this all the time, but seriously, if you're listening to the show and you're like, hey, wow, I would love to talk about Good Charlotte on a podcast, hit me up. I also want to keep mentioning blacklivesmatters.card.co, antisemitism.card.co, and anti-Asian-violence-resources.card.co. And as I did last time, I'm going to include a link for 27 meaningful ways to help Ukraine. Finally, Generation GC stickers are here. If you do want a sticker, there's two things you can do. Number one, support the show on Anchor. Go to anchor.fm/generationgcpod and click support. All that money goes right back into making the show the best that it can be. It helps me print and ship the stickers. It also helps me do the things I need to do and get the equipment I need, such as microphone cables, headphones, laptop risers, physical notebooks, and, paper and pens, because I do take some notes on paper, especially a lot of my planning and organization stuff. Number two, you're going to make a charitable donation to the Victory Project in Kansas City. Go to victorykc.org and click Donate Now. I was really happy that Ashleigh mentioned this organization. I had not been familiar with them before, but I think it's really wonderful to support organizations that are making a big local impact. The Victory Project is an initiative of Sporting Kansas City, and they're dedicated to helping children through all of life's challenges. They support children in the Kansas City and Midwest regions by uniting players, associates, fans, and community partners. You'll hear Ashleigh talk about this, but one thing that the Victory Project does that I think is so cool is they take child cancer patients, they bring them to professional sports games, give them a special seat, the whole crowd does a cheer. I just think that's such a great way to make these children feel special and just make them happy. They're going through something unimaginable, and this what a great way to cheer someone up. And also, please make sure to follow Generation GC at Generation GC Pod, POD, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'll occasionally post other ways that you can get stickers, but most importantly, I just use the socials to keep everyone updated on the show and just talk about Good Charlotte, talk about other things I like. Well, Thank you for tuning in. That's it for our intro. And now on to episode 88.
All right. So today we're talking about You Don't Mean Anything, which is by Simple Plan, and it features Joel Madden. You Don't Mean Anything is track 3 on Simple Plan's first album, No Pads, No Helmets, Just Balls. Track 2 was The Worst Day Ever. Track 4 was I'm Just a Kid. This song, like I said, it features Joel Madden, although he's not credited on Spotify or like I feel like a lot of places that you hear the song. Like I don't think he was, if I remember correctly, I don't think he was credited on the CD. And as I was doing my research and listening to the song, I'm like listening. And tell me if this like relates to you at all, Ashleigh. But like for the longest time, I was like, where does Joel sing? Because I don't like distinctly, like he doesn't have a solo or anything.
No, I actually, when I first like had the CD, you know, I had your little CD disc Walkman.
Yeah.
And, like I had the headphones and everything. Like my brother and I like had totally different tastes in music. So my dad's solution was, y'all have your own music. And so I had the headphones where I could just really hear a lot of different things. So it's at the very, very end where it's like the last you don't mean anything. And you can kind of hear the raspiness of Joel's voice more than you do of Pierre's.
Okay.
So it's really interesting. Like if you're isolating it out, you can really hear it. It's kind of like Mark Hoppus when he's featured in that song too, or in his song, excuse me. Yeah. You can tell that there's a difference and you're like, wait, what is that? But they do feature Mark Hoppus and he is credited.
Yeah. Wait, Joel isn't credited on the CD, is he? Because I didn't think he was.
No, because I was like going back through like in preparing for our conversation, I was like looking through everything and I was like, no, that's not it. But I remember this came out. Oh, God.
No, I was gonna say what's like just so funny to me about this. So I finally I found a video on YouTube that shows Joel in the studio with him with Simple Plan, and he's singing. I think it's like the last chorus. And it's, yes. I think that might've been from like Simple Plan's DVD that they put out.
And then I think that's where it came from because this was back in the Zanga days.
Yeah.
And I totally had a Zanga dedicated to Simple Plan. Like I will be the first to admit that. And I think like there were like this like screenshot stills from A Big Package for You.
Yes,
and I'm almost positive. Yeah. I'm almost positive that's where everything came from. Cause I was like, wait, that's Joel. Like I remember watching it and then it's like, wait, who is that? Why is he there? And then I was
why is he not? It's just wild to me that it's like he's on their DVD, but he's not credited on the album.
Yeah.
And he's I don't know.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that go in. Yeah. It's weird like that you'd think that they would want to play off that, you know, the audience and like, right. Oh, look who we featured. You know, we have a common denominator here, really.
Right. And we'll get into, you know, kind of the backstory of the feature, but yeah, it is kind of surprising they didn't like advertise that a little more. Cause like, I think I learned this from like, you know, some Simple Plan fan sites or maybe some Good Charlotte fan sites back in the day.
Right. Well, I think the reason why Mark was featured is Mark was a producer, I think, on Simple Plan's first album.
Okay. Was he?
At least he had his fingers in that pie for sure. I don't know. I can't remember the capacity. I'll have to look into it a little bit better, but I do know he had something in there. He wasn't as involved in the second one, but he was in the first one for sure.
Gotcha. Well, a little more about You Don't Mean Anything. So it was not a single, so I don't have chart info on the song, but the album did reach number 35 on the Billboard 200 in the US. It was certified platinum in Australia, 2 times platinum in Canada and the US, gold in Japan and New Zealand, and silver in the UK. So I think that's pretty cool. And Simple Plan did a 15-year anniversary tour for this album in, I think it was 2017. This song has been played live. It was ranked, setlist.fm has it ranked number 28 out of Simple Plan's most popular songs. Obviously, take that with a grain of salt. It does look like they played this song a ton in 2002, little bit like 2005, 2008, and then they played it a ton in 2017, 2018. And I was like, wait, why'd they bring it back? Oh, because they did the 15-year anniversary tour. Duh. Something I was wondering, Ashleigh, and I'm wondering if you have any insight on this. Do you know if they've ever played it live with Joel Madden? Like, they've toured together, but have Joel ever done the guest vocals?
I don't know on that, honestly. They toured a lot together in the mid 2000s. And I feel like that's just a prime opportunity. Again, you have a similar fan base, like get your crowd going and really hit that.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I saw Good Charlotte and Simple Plan together on the Noise to the World tour, which we'll definitely talk about. But I don't remember Joel singing this with them. I feel like that's something I would remember, but I don't know. But Ashleigh, we have a lot to go into with this song, as well as with, kind of the Good Charlotte Simple Plan connection. I think it's going to be really fun. But first, I want to help our listeners get to know you.
Yeah.
So the first question I ask everyone is, when did you first hear Good Charlotte and what were your first thoughts on them?
Oh my gosh. I don't really remember the first time I heard them. It was probably Anthem days for sure. Mm-hmm. That's like really when they exploded. I don't know. Like, I'm trying to remember like the first time. I do remember when I really started getting them heavy into rotation, which is probably about 2004, 2005, 2006 era. That's really when I was like buying all the CDs and doing the whole thing on the internet, because what happens to middle schoolers when you're exposed to the internet for the first time ever. You have MySpace, you have Zanga. So I remember just like scouring the internet for everything possible of information, because I'm a girl from like Nowheresville, Kansas. Like, I get nothing where I was from. So, like, for me to have the internet, I was like, wait, what? There's a whole world out there?
Yeah.
But I do remember it being Anthem. It was probably MTV, to be honest. Like, MTV really, like, those early days with TRL and music videos, it changed the game for a lot of musicians and for fans too.
It did. And there was, it still sometimes happens, but I feel like there was something really exciting about that time that a lot of, punk style musicians and musicians who really started with a DIY attitude, which, Good Charlotte always wanted to make it big, but they started very, they were doing it themselves, right? A lot of bands like that mm-hmm. kind of got to break through a little bit, which was really exciting. And there's, there's this like kind of resurgence now of pop punk, but it's like, it's not like the DIY stuff getting the mainstream. It's like, Travis Barker, like, and like, listen, I love all the Travis Barker stuff, but it's a lot of like, Travis Barker producing an album by some TikTok kid. Like, so it's a different thing for sure.
Yeah. It's really interesting, like, to look back, and, Blink is still one of my number one bands. Every time they're around, I still go see them. I have posters all over my apartment of Blink. Like the concert, like specialty posters, and they're like that. They're another band to me that like really signified. And we can talk about this later, because these are the few notes about like the song. They're really the band that signified like we don't have to do the things our parents did.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was like, wait, there's a whole life outside of Farmersville, Kansas. The little podunk town that I grew up in. Wow. And so for me, it's just like, okay, so that was like my introduction to music. It was just like, oh my gosh, there's a world out there.
Well, I also want to know, have you ever seen Good Charlotte live?
Yes. So like I said, I'm from the middle of nowhere, Kansas, right. And the closest big city was about 30, 45 minutes away. And I actually did go to high school in the city. So like I spent a lot of time there.
Okay.
But no one of consequence came there. It was all country acts or like your classic rock, like REO, Speedwagon, and Styx kind of bands. We did get this really weird emo underscene, like in the 2008, 2009 era, like when I was in high school. And I like remember just like lying to my mom, and be like, okay, well, I'm gonna go hang out with so-and-so. And we would go over this concerts at these weird places. One was like a Magic the Gathering event space. It was awesome. I had a great time. It's like early Pierce the Veil, early Emo Rosa there. So like it was an interesting scene, but they would never get like a Green Day, a Blink, a Good Charlotte there. So I didn't see them until I think 2017 when I was living in Kansas City.
Wow.
I was 24, 25, and I was like, this is a band from my youth, and I'm just now as an adult getting to see them. So that was like the first time I ever got to see Good Charlotte, which was really sad, but also really exciting because I was like 13 again.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I love that. That's gonna be really fun. I also want to ask, when did you first hear Simple Plan, and what were your first thoughts on Simple Plan?
I think it was similar. I think it was like MTV Days or something like that, or they had a lot of stuff in movies like back then. I think they were cheaper by the dozen with I'm Just a Kid.
Yeah.
And I just remember being like, who is this? What are they like? Wait, what? And then I think I got their second album, their self-titled album first before I got No Pads, No Helmets.
Wait, the self-titled or Still Not Getting Any?
Wait, is it the second one?
So it was No Pads, Still Not Getting Any, self-titled.
Still Not Getting, there was like, yeah. So it was Still Not Getting Any.
Okay.
That I got first. And I think I just bought it at Best Buy. Like, I was like, oh, no, whatever, just grab this kind of thing. And then backtracked to No Pads, No Helmets. So it was just like, and so for me, I was like, wait, I have a bunch to get caught up on.
I feel like I got them around the same time.
Yeah. And I just like, I don't know what it was, but like both of those albums, I was just like, okay, again, there's a whole world outside of here. Like I don't have to fall in line, and I don't want to be like you.
Yeah. I don't want to be just like you. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. And so it's like a thing I've really held dear to me, like as a 30-year-old now, where I'm like, okay, I don't have to do the things that were expected of me. I don't know what it was about Simple Plan that just like stuck out more in my mind from Good Charlotte. I think it was like the punkiness of it, like as opposed to the broodiness of it. Like, trust me, I had the broody feelings going on, like it was there, but I think Simple Plan was a different outlet for me to like express myself.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I'm really excited to kind of go into some of the similarities and differences. Cause like I have all these thoughts, but like, I think you're going to have some different thoughts, and I think we're going to have a really fun discussion there.
Yeah. This is like 20 years in the making. I'm super excited to be talking about this.
Well, I have a couple more questions I just want to ask you just to learn more about your background. But I do have to ask, have you ever seen Simple Plan live?
Yes. So again, it didn't happen until I was much later in life.
Fair, yeah.
I think it was the end of 2018. And I actually got to photograph them because I'm a concert photographer.
Yes!
And so the venue I was working at, they have kind of like a 2-show per month limit for all the volunteer photographers.
Oh, interesting.
And it's like a Google sheet. And so the manager will go in and put in all of the acts and their dates, and then you basically just sign up for it. It's a bloodbath sometimes because they get really big acts. I'm
sure.
I was camping out for days, and I was like, there is no way these little kids are going to get in front of me to shoot Simple Plan. So like, I'm getting very animated because I was very animated about this. But like, I camped in this spreadsheet forever. And like, I had all my notifications turned on to make sure that I got this show, and I did. And I was in grad school at the time. It was the same night. It was the same night that I was doing night classes. It was the same night that I had class. And so I just went to my teacher and I was like, look, I'm a concert photographer. I have a show tonight. I will be in class for like an hour of it, and then I'm going. Yeah. And he was like, hey, this is a working professionals program. I get it. You all have your side hustles. Like, okay. So the fact that I got like teachers' permission to go to a concert was like even better.
I love that. I used to do that kind of stuff in college too. So you're not alone.
It was November of 19, actually. I'm like looking back on my Instagram. So it was right before pandemic.
Oh yeah. I saw them on that tour as well in New Jersey.
And I almost had tickets. I almost had tickets to the 15th year anniversary tour, but they sold out so fast in the city that like I lived adjacent to, which was my college town. And I was like, and I knew a girl whose boyfriend worked at the venue. I was like, what can you do? She's like, it is not going to happen. So I was really sad I didn't catch him on that tour, but I got him 4 years later. So you know what? I'm happy.
Yeah, that works out. Well, Ashleigh, I want to hear a little more about your concert photography. I mean, how did that start for you? And I'm curious as well. I mean, I know you have like a background in journalism and marketing, and I'm curious if, you know, your concert photography work kind of connects to some of your academic and professional pursuits.
Oh, definitely. My mom always said that she knew that I needed a camera in my hands when I broke the family video camera at like 3.
Oh, wow.
So she was really good about encouraging it. So like I had like little point and shoots that I would like take into concerts and shows and, you know, things like that. Like my first real concert, like I say that in quotations, was The Killers in 2004. But my actual first concert was the Dixie Chicks when I was like a first grader.
Oh my God, amazing.
So I count it, but I don't. Like I count it, but I don't count it kind of thing. But I just like remember taking like point and shoots into concerts and things like that. And I always had a camera in my hand. Like I was always the documenter. Like everybody, like when I graduated high school, my vice principal was like, this is the first time I've seen you without a camera in your hands.
Oh,
so it's always been there. So again, like sneaking them into like those emo shows back in the day, like they didn't care. Like the venues like had no security. Like
no, and
youth bands were just getting started.
Bands like that, they wanted as many people as possible to take pictures.
Yes. And again, this is Facebook, MySpace days, like early Facebook, late MySpace.
Yeah.
So you're getting a lot of people talking about music on these platforms. I had a really good friend in high school that was in a band, and they were like playing these little shows here and there. And they would just be like, hey, come to grab your camera, come hang out and come grab pictures of us. So it was kind of nice because I got in with them a lot more. And then in high school, I was on photo stuff with yearbook newspaper staff. And then when I got into college, I was on the newspaper staff. I was photo editor like my junior year, but I was on the staff from my time as a freshman. And I went to school in Lawrence, Kansas, which is a very big scene for
Lawrence,
music. It's a huge scene. There's like 5 concert venues. Yeah, it's a great
I was
place
in
to catch
Lawrence
shows. Like actually
a few
10
times
years
on
ago.
tour. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great place to catch a show. There's so many great little venues. And as photo staff, I was able to submit for press passes. And I got it, like the biggest show I got to shoot at that time was Taking Back Sunday in Bayside. They were doing a tour.
Oh, I remember that tour. Like 2012. I remember that tour.
And it was one of Taking Back Sunday's anniversary albums. I think it's Where You Want to Be, which is my favorite album by them. And I just remember shooting that show and being like, oh my God, like this could really be a life. Like this could be everything.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun, but I also was a sports photographer. So again, it's being on the sidelines, capturing those behind the scene moments, capturing those like on performance moments for both your sports teams and your band.
Sure. Yeah.
That really made me feel alive.
Yeah.
And then as I graduated college, moved to Kansas City. Again, Kansas City is a huge scene. There's venues everywhere. I have a friend who has a music publication called Imperfect Fifth, and she was just like, hey, we need photographers. So I started shooting shows for her. And we had a really big music festival called Buzz Beach Ball. It was hosted by one of our radio stations. It's no longer in existence, sadly. But I got into that. I was a staff photographer for one of our outdoor venues called Starlight Theaters. And then there's another one downtown Kansas City called The Truman. And so I was a staff photographer for them too. So It just kind of snowballed like after college, where I could just shoot for them, and I shoot for a couple different publications for outside of the venues. So that was fun, having a great time, like where I was shooting like 4 shows a week, going to grad school and working full time.
Yeah, that's, that's just your life. Like if you're doing that, because I was there at one point too, and it's like, yeah, that just kind of becomes your life if you're doing that.
It was so much fun, but and then the pandemic hit, and then of course the first thing to go away was shows and sports, and it was really sad. And very, 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 very depressing for a while, because you're just like, you crave that energy that you were getting 4 nights a week, but you don't have it anymore.
I totally,
so yeah, that's kind of like my little short, my short history with photography.
Amazing. Well, last thing I really want to know, Ashleigh, before we head into kind of the song and everything, I know that you finished last year, you finished a master's degree in integrative marketing, and then very recently you started a PhD program in sports studies. Yes. So I would just love to hear a little bit more about like what you're learning in your PhD program and where you think it might take you.
Yeah. So I work at a university in Mississippi, and one of our benefits is that we get two classes for free a semester. So I was like, okay, well, I moved to the city where I know no one. I'm going to go back to school and not have to pay for it, which is really nice, because I would never do it because I can't afford it. So I chose sports studies again because of my sports journalism background. There's a lot of overlap within the concert scene and the sports scene. You know, it's events, it's marketing, there's so much. In the class I'm in right now is event and facility management. So, you know, I approach a lot of my conversations I have in class from a concert and sports standpoint. And so it's really fascinating to look at that. I actually wanted to do the master's program, and they're like, no, you already have a master's. Like my advisor's like, just do the PhD. Like if you ever want to teach in academia, like you're going to have a PhD to begin with. And I was like, yeah, that's like 23 extra credit hours I just don't want to take for the dissertation. He's like, I can get you out here in 3.5 years. And I was like, okay, sold.
It's not bad. Not bad.
So, so dissertation is, it's still being developed, but I'm thinking about doing women ownership of sports management and sports teams. And looking at how the media is around it. So if you guys have any ideas, articles, topics of conversation, throw them my way, because I don't know where to start with this dissertation.
Wow. I don't know really anything about the sports world, but I worked at Giants games for a brief time, but I just think that's very cool what you're doing in terms of just kind of trying to study what you're studying. Yeah. Well, Ashleigh, let's get into.
I mean, why not?
Yeah, exactly. Let's get into You Don't Mean Anything. So we connected. Yeah. It was almost a year ago. I was looking back at our emails. And I suggested this song because you had mentioned Simple Plan in your emails at one point. I would love to know, Ashleigh, what sticks out to you about You Don't Mean Anything?
Honestly, there's a lot of common themes between Good Charlotte and Simple Plan right around this era. There is a lot of identity to be had here. Both bands are finding out who they are as individuals and as a band. There's a lot of like breaking away from stigmas, whether those are placed on by industry, placed by family, placed by fans. There's a lot of different stuff that's going on here. And like on first approach, like people who are just hearing the song for the first time or for the first time after a long time, they're going to be like, oh, this is just an angsty song. Like, you don't mean anything. Like,
right.
There's an attitude behind it for sure. But like, I really encourage people to listen to the lyrics and really get to the meat of it, because there's some good points here. And it's really an expression. It's an expression of just like not letting people get to you or not letting people dictate your life.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, we're gonna get back into kind of like the interpretation in a sec. I mean, I've had so much fun exploring like my own interpretation of the song. But I do want to ask real quick, did you have any misheard lyrics upon listening to the song and looking at the lyrics?
I don't think so. Everything was pretty like as I remembered it, and like I was listening all of this week, just like going down memory lane, and it's a basic song. It really is. Yeah, but I don't want people to basic songs for being like non-essential.
No, definitely, it's definitely essential. Well, similar note, Ashleigh. I mean, do you have a favorite line from this song?
opening up with like, maybe I'm just not good enough for you. Like, how many times have people just felt that in everything that they do, whether it be work, personal relationships, family relationships? Like, that's such a powerful hit, and it's a win open too. And as a 30-year-old, I'm still struggling with that, you know, for every aspect. And so I think that's a really powerful punch to really hit on the first line.
It really is. I mean, it's intense. It really starts off strong. I mean, I noted, I really like the bridge where he says, I know you think you know me. You don't know anything. I know you want to help me. I don't need anything. And, you know, yes, they rhymed me and anything and anything. You know, clever rhyming, I know. But I just really like how that sentence structure works out. I think it's pretty clever. Like, it's simple, but it's clever.
Yeah.
So let's get back into what this song is about, because I will say my initial interpretation until like probably like this week, like my interpretation was one thing, but I'm now picking up on some other themes, which is like so much fun and exactly why I love doing this podcast. You were saying you kind of think it's about just sticking it to the man in a sense, like, hey, like,
yeah.
I
think always like on first bet, they're going to be like, oh, it's about a girl or a significant other where you don't mean anything to me. But I think if you listen to this album, and especially Perfect, there's a lot of tie-ins that go into not feeling adequate. And so I think if you're not really familiar with Simple Plan and this album and the subsequent album, it's really hard to connect those themes unless like you're really looking for them.
That's a really good point. I also honestly, like, until very recently, and like, I love this album. I know this album. I own this album. You know, my inclination really was that, you know, the narrator is talking about like an ex, right? An ex-girlfriend, and just trying to say, you know, oh, I don't even care about you anymore, as a way to like take the power back after a breakup. Like, okay, this person made them feel like they weren't good enough. They brought them down. You know, I'm kind of wondering if there's a little like sarcasm going on here, like trying to prove that you don't care about the other person when like you actually do, like trying to be a little cooler than you are. But and I stick with that as a possible interpretation. But yeah, like the more I've listened to it the past couple of days as I've been getting ready for this, and as we've been talking, I'm like, there's totally another angle, which is kind of about like sticking it to the person or the people or the corporate entities that are bringing you down, you know, whether that's bullies or that's a terrible boss. I mean, whatever it is, just kind of like saying, you don't mean anything to me. Like, maybe I'm not good enough for you, but so what? Like, I don't care.
Right. And that's kind of, I think I had this for some interpretation. I was a kid, like, oh, it's a girl or it's a guy or it's significant other or whatever. And the relationship didn't work out. But then like, as I got older, I was like, no, there's some bigger themes with this whole album here. And of course, this era of pop punk was really big on not being a corporate sellout.
Yes.
And I think poser was the term of this era. Like, you have to be a poser. I just remember hearing that a lot growing up. I'm like, what does that even mean?
Well, I feel like what's interesting, and you know, something I even had in my notes here was like, okay, is this song pop punk? Is it emo? Like, what's the difference? And I feel like one of the differences is that often, and it's totally not exclusive, but often pop punk bands would sing about, you know, individuality and identity and such themes like this. Emo would be more likely to sing about a girl.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you know, either couldn't cross over.
There is crossover for sure.
So much.
Like, and I just like, and like they were on the cusp of something, like this being in, you know, the early 2000s, mid 2000s. They were really on the cusp of a lot of things. Like, this was really before emo was emo.
Yeah.
So like, I want to point that out for people that may not be as well versed in like early 2000s, because I know 2000 like 7, 8, 9, 10 is when it just blew up.
Well, emo was a thing before this. If we're talking about like the original wave of emo with like Rites of Spring and bands like that, but emo
it didn't come mainstream really
definitely
until a little
not
bit later. Yeah. So that's like when people think about like Warped Tour era, and I know Warped Tour had been going on for like 17 years, and it had various like iterations.
I think it was like when emo became like something talked about in like, I feel like the New York Times, you know, like I remember being in high school and my dad showing me a New York Times article about how New Jersey, which is, you know, where I grew up, where we lived, New Jersey is like home to so many great emo bands. And I was like, you know, it was like, on the one hand, it was like, oh, great. Like my dad's like interested in my music. And on the other hand, it was like, oh, my dad is like interested in emo music. This is so embarrassing.
It's like there's times where dad's like, oh, you know, Death Cab for Cutie, right? I was like, yes, I know Ben Gibbard, Dad. Tell me your point.
Yeah. Well, I want to go into sort of the backstory of this song. I don't have a whole, I was not able to find a whole lot of backstory in terms of like Simple Plan's writing of this song, but I did find a little bit on how Joel Madden came to be on this song. So Simple Plan guitarist Sebastian Lefevre discussed it in 2 interviews. So the first is with the Duff Boy from 2012. And the interviewer asked, how important have Blink-182, Good Charlotte, and the Vans Warped Tour been to your style and growth as a band? And he starts out by saying that having Mark on the album was a big push for them. And then he said, Good Charlotte as well, Joel as well. He took a chance with us. It was the first album. We had seen them play with, okay, so this is transcribed as MSDX, but I think they mean MXPX. We were friends with them, so it's always a risk. It's kind of like putting your stamp of approval on a band that nobody knows. For Good Charlotte, they were pretty much telling their fans, Simple Plan is cool. You should listen to them. For anybody to do that out of the blue is a big deal. And then we ended up touring with Good Charlotte a bunch of times after that, and we became great friends. Playing on the Warped Tour is just something you have to do. It's fun. It's a lot of cool bands. You can see a lot of fans every day. And then I'll read this other quote from Seb, and then we can kind of talk about it. This one is with tonedeaf.brag, or tonedeaf.thebrag.com. He said, with our first album, we were still nobodies, and Good Charlotte and Blink-182 were kind enough to believe that it wasn't going to be horrible for them to be involved with appearing on it, and we felt like it was a vote of confidence.
And I think it's a camaraderie. I can't remember if Seb used that word, but it really was like, it was a brotherhood. Like there were these 4 bands, and I'm talking Blink, Green Day, Good Charlotte, and Simple Plan, that were really kind of integral in this little era to helping each other out. Like, you know, they weren't starting anything with anybody. They were just making sure that everybody supported the music.
Yeah. I think, and this is like, it just makes it so wild to me that they didn't like, it was like the fans knew that Joel was on this song, but I felt like if you didn't seek out that information, you wouldn't necessarily know. And that's so wild to me, considering how they're talking about like how cool it was to have Good Charlotte like put their stamp of approval. And I work in the music industry. I work in music video promotion, and sometimes there will be a feature on a song that the artist will send their slate to us, which is like, you know, song name, artist name, director, producer, and everything. And sometimes the artist doesn't fill that out, or the manager doesn't fill it out correctly. Sometimes they put the feature in like alongside the artist name. Sometimes it's alongside the song name. And I don't know enough to say how that's decided. And I don't know enough to say why it wasn't credited or advertised as much as it could have been.
Yeah. I'm also wondering if it was a Joel decision. If he was just like, you know, I want you guys to get this, you deserve it. I don't want you to feel like you have to ride on my cloud. Maybe it very well could have been that way too. I'm wondering if it was just like, I want to be kind of like a hit here.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Kind of like, I mean, look, he sings on the song. He doesn't have like a major part in the song, really. I almost wonder if it was more about this kind of really kickstarted like a kind of camaraderie between the bands than something more specific like, oh, Joel, wrote half this song.
Right. Yeah. And so I'm wondering if it was just like a maybe a Good Charlotte Joel decision, like, hey, we're happy to do this, but we don't want you to feel like you have to put our name attached to it. It very well could have been like that.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
And there's a lot of time, like I see in marketing and branding, it's people are more than happy to collaborate on things, but sometimes they don't want any of the credit just because that's not who they are, or just personal reasons get in the way. They're just like, this isn't about me, this is about you. I see that a lot.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. And I had not considered that, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, marketing brain always comes back.
Yeah. Ashleigh, do you have any memories or stories that you want to share about You Don't Mean Anything?
It was like a really weird time for me growing up. Like, my parents were divorced when I was really young, and there was always a lot of like struggle between the hierarchy between my mom and my dad. Like, well, your mom says this, but this is how it goes at my house, or your dad does this, but I don't like that. And so I just remember like being in the middle of this all.
It's like, who do you listen to?
Yeah. And as a 13-year-old, you're struggling with so many different things, emotions, your identity, like, and you have both sides telling you this is who you are, this is who you are. And so for me, it was just like, this is a really good song. And this whole album really was just like, okay, you are yourself. And that's kind of one of those things I remember feeling about this whole thing, was just like, okay, your opinion doesn't matter and I don't have to do what you say, kind of thing. But again, I'm 13 and I do.
Yeah.
It's just like, I just remember a lot of this sentiment coming up when I was listening to this album and this song too.
I get that. I mean, yeah, I think that's a common feeling among anyone who's ever been 13.
Right.
And it's certainly something that I think a lot of people that have come on this show, and a lot of people that are fans of Good Charlotte, of Simple Plan, it's a feeling that a lot of us have shared.
Right. Yeah. And then I just remember like a lot of, obviously Joel and Benji were very honest and open about their relationship with their dad.
Yeah.
And that kind of resonated with me a lot too. It's just like, I have a great relationship with my dad now. I don't want people to think that we don't ever talk, but there was a period of time where we weren't talking, and I was hitting hard on the Good Charlotte then.
Yeah. And
I was just like, okay, if they can get through it, I can get through it.
Yeah.
And like, it was like a year later and my dad and I started talking again. So like, everything's fine. Like, I love my dad. Like, he lives in California. I go see him at least twice a year. So it's like one of those things where, as a 13-year-old, you don't know what to think, because you have this influx of hormones and emotion really going through your body that you can't make a decision about. So I just remember like hearing all these songs and just thinking like, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Like, and that's a really great feeling of having that, that connection at a really, really pivotal time in your life.
Definitely. It's huge. I want to touch on any other Simple Plan songs or Good Charlotte songs that you think this kind of relates to. Because I have a few thoughts.
I have my notes right here. I'm like looking through it. There's a lot of things, like I think Perfect is a big one by Simple Plan.
Okay.
It's the slower song for sure. It's not as in your face, but it's just as emotional. It's just as meaningful. Especially that music video.
Yeah.
When we talk about music videos, that one like lived on TRL forever. And it was a powerful, powerful sight to see. And so there's a lot of things like that I think connect this album together. On the Good Charlotte side, like there's just so many, it's hard to like narrow down one, because like I'll pick like lyrics from very random songs from
Sure, yeah.
different periods. I'm like, that's that. And I'll pull them and throw them together and form my own narrative. So like, there's just a lot to choose from on Good Charlotte.
There definitely is. I mean, the one that came to mind for me is Festival Song.
Oh yeah.
But you're totally right. There's a lot. In terms of Simple Plan, I thought of a few. I thought of two really. And number one was like that this is kind of the antithesis to I Do Anything. Like, yeah. I'd do anything for you, but also, you don't mean anything to me anymore. And look, maybe they were written about different things. Maybe both those songs were written about the same situation and they're like trying to have try to show two different perspectives on it. I don't know.
Very true.
The other one that comes to mind is One by One, where he's talking about how like one by one will prove them wrong.
Yes.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Good Charlotte Simple Plan connection.
Yes.
We're going to actually jump around a little bit in my notes.
Okay.
There was an interview with scenezine.au from 2018 where Jeff talks about meeting Good Charlotte and how they still crossed paths. He said, a lot of the bands from that genre are not together anymore or have different band members. But those bands are still going. We were very fortunate to have Mark Hoppus put a stamp of approval on one of the songs. That came about because Pierre and Chuck were touring in Reset prior to Simple Plan. And then he says, we knew the Good Charlotte guys from going to their shows and talking about the industry. It was a tight community where everybody knew each other. Obviously, there was competition amongst the bands, but Blink-182 was on another planet.
Oh, yeah.
I know that Simple Plan has mentioned Good Charlotte as kind of an influence and a favorite band of theirs. And of course, we have to cite the song Grow Up, which is also on this album, was also included, I think, in the Scooby-Doo soundtrack, which begins, this is who I am, and this is what I like. GC, Sum, and Blink, and MXPX rockin' my room. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember hearing that the first time, and I flipped out. I was like, what? Simple Plan is singing about Good Charlotte?
Yeah, and like for me, I was just like, and I remember Blink a lot growing up too. Yeah. Like Blink came out like the year I was born, so like I'm as old as they are, which is kind of funny to think about. But in a lot of ways, I was still really young. In a lot of ways, I was still really young for Blink.
Yes,
because if you know, kind of thing. So like Blink wasn't really a thing to me until the later years. Like I would hear like all the small things on the radio for sure. But like this is about the time I started discovering the backlog of Blink.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, like just a lot of like Dude Ranch and Cheshire Cat, like things you're just like, oh, okay, I see the connections here. Cause like if you watch A Big Package for You, they talk a lot about Blink and just
they do.
They were very they were like 22-year-old guys. Like I
was thinking about this when I watched the minute and a half clip of Joel in the studio with Simple Plan. And it's like, I really don't want to repeat some of what's said because I think it's aged very poorly, but it's like, they said a lot of like crude things to each other that like at that time, that was just kind of what you did. And I think
it was very
aged poorly. Look, we're talking about Simple Plan. We have to touch on David being removed from the band a couple years ago due to inappropriate behavior, right? And not to derail this, but I feel like
to be talked about.
Yeah, and I feel like the crude comments, and like I saw Simple Plan when I was 13, and I remember they talked about how sexy they thought the crowd was, and like most of the crowd was like 13-year-olds and their dads,
right?
And I just kind of wonder, like, I kind of wonder what they think of that looking back, and I do suspect that kind of stage banter and those silly comments in the studio, I suspect that may have possibly let inappropriate behavior slip under the radar, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah. And that's kind of a lot what my dissertation in my program is going to be about.
Okay.
Is looking at women in for, and there's a lot of going on in both industries that are very they're just plain awful. Like there's not a nice way to say it. It's just awful. And so I think we need to talk about it. And to be totally honest, I was a victim of sexual harassment and abuse as well when I was in college. And if I hadn't advocated for myself, like I wouldn't be where I am today. So for me, it's like we have to talk about it. And so I'm not going to shy away from a conversation about it. But I do agree. I think this era was a lot of banter, and it was a lot of like, oh, well, it was meant as a joke, and people brushing it off and downplaying it. And
but
people,
the issue is that like excuses the people who quote unquote do actually mean it. And it's like, it is a slippery slope, I think, into, you know, like continued sexual harassment, into assault, you know? And I, you know, look, I quit. I worked at Giants games for a bit doing fan photography, and I quit because I kept getting sexually harassed. And like, I mean, I had a couple guys touch my butt and just grab my butt or like touch my hips and like ask for my phone number. And I reported, you know, I remember one time I was like, all right, screw this, like stop doing that right now. And like brought over security, like reported it to like the head of security or head of facilities, whatever, at my stadium. And the situation that eventually made me quit was like some guy kissed me. And they were kind of like, the, you know, supervisor at the stadium, whatever, was kind of like, it is a problem.
Yeah. And I think we're in a phase of life now where people are actually having the courage and to speak up, and people are recognizing it. That is not just something that we can easily swat away. Like, you know, there's a fine line, and a lot of people like to jump that line, unfortunately. But I think we as a society are getting better at recognizing it and understanding it and shutting it down and saying this isn't appropriate. No, you're wrong. You've crossed this line that you need to take 10 steps back and get out. I could say a couple other harsh things right now, but I'm going to keep it PG. But yeah, it's just interesting. And I think with this era of pop punk, you know, Simple Plan they're not the only one that's innocent here. And
no,
obviously Jessie Lacey, a brand new, is the biggest one that comes from this era.
And then more recently stuff came up about Jack from All Time Low, you know, which again, it was like, if you ever saw All Time Low live, I mean, you heard the stuff they said on stage, you know?
Oh yeah. And again, it was very much a boys club. And I think,
so funny because like so many of the fans were young women, and I can tell you that like at least two thirds to 75% of my audience, kind of varies based on episode, is women.
Right. And so it's just like, for us, it's like, okay, we're your audience and you're catering toward this good old boys club still. But it's changed a lot in the past 5, 6, 7 years. So like, I'm not going to say it's the same way anymore, but I do think it's still happening, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's definitely still happening. It's progress, right? You know, it's time.
There's been a lot of progress. Yeah. So, I mean, I was really sad to hear it.
Yeah. I think part of it is just like, part of the progress is that people feel okay to speak up.
Agreed.
And it's going to take, you know, a little while of people feeling a little more okay to speak up before I feel like we see this not really happening.
Yeah, I agree with that. And when I heard about Simple Plan, I was shocked, but I was also like not surprised.
Yeah, same. Sadly. I texted a few friends that are, you know, diehard Simple Plan fans, and you know, a couple of them would be like, oh yeah, you know, I actually have like a friend of a friend who has like hung out with them and said that this checks out. And, you know, they made the right decision. I will say, I do want to say Simple Plan made the right decision in removing him from the band. And when that went down, didn't they also say they were going to like have like improved safety measures at their shows?
Yeah, I remember seeing it on Instagram and just reading everything that they were going to be taking it very seriously. And I applaud them. I think I studied crisis communication a lot too in my master's program.
Sure, yeah.
And the first thing is addressing the issue, not shying away from it. And the second thing is having a plan of action. And they did both of those things.
Which,
so their immediate reaction.
I was sorry to interrupt, but yeah, all time low, I don't think handled it well at all.
No, I don't. There's a right and a wrong way every single time you look at it. And that's just one thing that we can learn from is people's mistakes and people's shortfallings. But I think Simple Plan did a great job about it. And unfortunately, it was right before pandemic happened, or maybe it was the middle, like in early days of pandemic. I think it was the early days of the pandemic. So I personally have only been to one concert since my last big one was March 6, 2020. I've been to two since then. So like two in the past 2 years is like, it's not a lot.
No.
And so for me to see some action coming forth. So I haven't really been on the scene a lot since pandemic, but I think the fact that they made it a vow to have good measures being taken to support their fans, I think that speaks volumes. And I don't know if that was a PR move or if that was an internal move that they decided to do themselves. I haven't figured that one out yet.
Look, it kind of doesn't really matter because if they, are actually going to be putting that into action as shows happen for them, then they made the right decision.
Agreed, 100%. My marketing brain is just like, okay, who was your decision?
Right. Was this like, Pierre, Chuck, Sebastian, and Jeff kind of coming up with this, or was this like their management and publicists? Like,
yeah, exactly. So I think overall, like, and the fact that they were on board to do anything, that speaks volumes in my opinion. That they were able to say, yes, we're going to do this, and they didn't shy away from this challenge because it really is. It's a huge challenge.
It is. Yeah, I am really glad that Simple Plan kind of did the right thing, and it makes me feel like I can comfortably keep listening to Simple Plan and talking about them. I don't feel weird about it like I might with some other bands that have not handled these well.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Well,
they're not tarnished.
Exactly. Let's get back a little bit to kind of the Good Charlotte and Simple Plan connection. A big one being the Noise to the World tour in 2005. Chuck told the Today Show, he said, "Our fans have been asking for that tour for a long time, and their fans as well. It's perfect timing. Kids are going to have their money's worth." That was the first time I saw Good Charlotte was on that tour here in Philadelphia. I think that was only the only co-headliner they ever did.
I think so too. That does sound right.
But I was like, I wonder if they were ever on Warped Tour at the same time. They were.
I would say that was
So Good Charlotte was on Warped Tour 5 times. Simple Plan was on Warped Tour 13 times.
They loved it.
And both of them played at some of the 2019, 25th anniversary shows or whatever. The only time Good Charlotte was on that Simple Plan was not on Warped Tour was 2016. Every other time, the other 4 times Good Charlotte was on, Simple Plan was also on Warped Tour. They were also both on the Warped Rewind at Sea cruise.
I do remember hearing about that. And I was like, you're on a boat with your favorite fans? Oh, sign me up.
It sounded really fun. I get so seasick, so easily. And kind of the only thing that really works is Dramamine, but Dramamine knocks you out. And that's why it works, because it just knocks you out. But I don't know. I heard so many people that have come on this show have talked about that cruise, and I'm like, I should have just bit the bullet and taken the Dramamine and figured it out.
Just got it. Yeah. I know Emery. I love Emery. Emery was one of my integral parts of growing up, and I think they're doing a cruise to that Mexico, that Southern California to Cabo cruise thing, and I was just like, oh, it's really funny because in Shallow Seas We Sail.
Yeah,
their album title.
Gotcha.
So it's just so fun to see bands still wanting to do these types of things that have been on the scene for so long.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say it's them just trying to stay relevant. No, they genuinely care about this. They want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
And they want to make sure that they're still interacting with their fans in a way that their fans want to interact with them. And I think that's brilliant.
I think that's really huge. Yeah. Let's get into some of the similarities between Good Charlotte and Simple Plan. And I have a few things written down, but I want to hear some of your thoughts first.
Yes, this is like the bulk of my notes.
Yes,
came
from. I had emailed listeners. I had emailed Ashleigh like before I even sent the notes over, and it was like, I really want to spend some time talking about like comparing Good Charlotte and Simple Plan. So like, make sure you have a lot of notes on that.
And I delivered.
Yes.
I think the biggest thing for me is just they were both expressive bands, and they weren't afraid to express them. And, you know, take that for how you want. And it's not only their music, but it's their appearance. Like, you know, Simple Plan had that spiky hair and like the cargo pants. And then
oh my God, the cargo pants.
Yes, with the big old socks in the Vans. Like that was their form of expression. And then you have Good Charlotte, who are the dark, broody, tattooed, and pierced, and makeup.
I'm broody. I'm Good Charlotte. Yeah.
Yes. And so I think that they're both expressive bands in their appearance and their music and their band representation. I think that's the biggest thing that I came away with, that they weren't afraid to say who they were.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think that ties into a lot of themes that they both have in their songs, which is, you know, everything from family troubles and mental health, but, you know, a really big theme as well of not fitting in and figuring out who you are and sticking it to the man.
Yeah, that's my biggest thing. And I think I wrote down, like, I think they both really resonate with fans because they didn't want to put up with BS.
Yeah.
Like, whatever it was, if it was from, you know, the record label or the, you know, the industry or the man in any terms, they were, if you think about it, they were raised in an era like where punk rock was still kind of a newer thing. You know, this is like the 80s.
Yeah.
Punk really is big, the 70s, 80s. And we were raised on an era where like you keep your head down and you just get through. Like you just power through. And they were really the first ones saying, we don't want to do that. And so, you know, you can stick up for yourself and into this cycle that of not saying anything. And like, you know, we're gonna cause a ruckus. We're gonna make our voices be heard.
I love that. I think you were onto something really strong with just talking about fans. It's something I noted is that like both of these bands had a lot of fans who really loved them. I mean, how many people have Good Charlotte tattoos, Simple Plan tattoos? Right. But both Good Charlotte and Simple Plan have not always been loved by critics, as we'll get to in a little bit. We're going to read some reviews. And, you know, both of these bands had, and I think this is highly related to the fact that these bands were not loved by critics, but both of these bands had largely like teen girl audiences when their first records came out, and they were both pretty uncool to like, especially for boys.
Oh my God. My brother, he's like 18 months older than me. He was just like, would you just turn that crap off? Like, and he was in a corn phase. Like, he can't even talk.
I listen, as a Good Charlotte fan, as someone who runs a Good Charlotte podcast, like, I don't think I really get to like have anything to say about anyone else's like music, whether it's like cool or not. But like, I think same goes for someone in a corn phase. Look, corn is great. Corn is great. Like, you want to listen to corn, go listen to corn. But you know.
Yeah, that's why my dad's like, you both get your own CD players and you both shut up.
Yeah.
So thank God for iPods, right? Like, oof. But I will say, my brother and I did have a common denominator, and that was Sum 41.
Really?
So yes, he got into early Sum 41, and like would let me listen to that a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit.
Interesting. Okay.
And then we branched off from there. I went more the pop punk. He went more the heavy rock. He also had a Bob Marley phase, but also What Teenage Boy didn't. leave that one for open for interpretation.
Yeah. Look, my brother had I think my brother had a little bit of a Bob Marley face. I mean, like,
yeah,
we all know. Well, let's get into some of the differences between Good Charlotte and Simple Plan, and I think it's important to talk about differences in the music as well as kind of their trajectories. And again, I have a lot of notes, but I really want to hear first. I want to hear what some of your initial thoughts are.
Yeah. So if you're looking at like modern day Simple Plan and Good Charlotte, it's interesting where they took their careers. Good Charlotte really took a step back to focus on themselves. They got married. Everybody got married and they had children. They had second careers. They were more industry oriented, appearing on the Australian, was it
The
X
Voice?
Factor? The Voice. Okay. Fun fact, I studied abroad in Australia and I lived across the street from Fox Studios the same time that Joel was doing that down there. And like, we could have got tickets, but I was just like a poor college student studying abroad in Australia, because it's really expensive. And I was like, I'm kicking myself 10 years later. It's like, I should have just went there and watched the record. So that's one of my life regrets is not doing that.
Oh my God, yeah.
Like we could see the studio from our apartment. Like it was like over this giant park. It's called Moore Park. And that's where Fox Studios are. Yeah. So that was like my thing where I really realized that Good Charlotte took a step back from touring. They became family men. They became more industry people. They were more of a guiding light for young new artists.
Well, Madden management company. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So then you have Simple Plan on the other hand, they're still touring, they're still writing, they're still producing music in various capacities, and which is funny because they were the ones that like didn't want to grow up, so they kind of really did within their music, but they're still a band, they're still touring.
Right. That's kind of two of the big things for me. Good Charlotte, Good Charlotte grew up. Right. Both in their music and in their lifestyles. And Good Charlotte is still a band, but like they're very much doing things like when they choose to. And I kind of think it's not likely that they would put out another record or even really much more music until and unless there's like, it's like really safe to tour. And I know a lot of people are touring right now, but also like half those shows are getting canceled 6 hours before. So no, it's not really a safe time to tour right now, if you ask me. And if you ask a lot of people,
I agree.
I feel like, Simple Plan. I mean, I think they're all married. I'm not sure if all of them are, but I think most of them are married. I know Pierre has children. I believe Jeff has children too. He talked about it when I interviewed him.
I know Seb does too.
Yeah.
I think they all actually have children. They've settled down in capacity for sure.
But in terms of their music, it's like Simple Plan kind of, I feel like stayed in this like teenager mindset almost.
They're still writing about love, and obviously their love has changed over time. So right. But they're still writing about the common themes. And I'm not going to lie. I dropped off it probably when I got to college of the kind of punk pocky, emo era.
Sure.
So when I was looking back this past week, a lot of their older stuff, and I've been hopping in here and there just to listen to it, and it's the same, but it's different.
Yeah. I think, well, two things that come to mind for me. Number one is like, I feel like Generation RX, which was Good Charlotte's last record, which is like 3.5 years old now. It was a lot more introspective than I feel like Simple Plan has been. And it's not that Simple Plan doesn't sing about their feelings, because they do, but I feel like they don't dive into like why I feel this way and here's my insecurities in the way that especially Good Charlotte does on that record.
Yeah, and Good Charlotte made their name off of that kind of feeling though. Yeah. So I think that maybe they were more comfortable doing it long term than Simple Plan was. And Simple Plan maybe just like, look, I have an outlet here, but I want to keep my private thoughts and my private feelings private. which is very likely as well. I mean, there's a lot of people, especially in today's media age, where people are very protective of their life outside of their job. That's not just for celebrities, that's for anybody.
Well, it's interesting. It's like I don't know do you use TikTok at all?
I have issues with TikTok, so I do Instagram Reels, which is not any better, but
fair.
It's a long story.
Fair. Well, what I was going to say is like, I'll see TikToks with like, someone, there's this one girl I follow on TikTok who like has talked about like her jaw surgery that she just got. She had this like major jaw surgery. And I just started following her because I always started seeing her post on my feed. And I was like, okay, like interesting. Like I never knew about this like major jaw condition, you know? And it's like, or people, I was recently diagnosed with ADHD and I see a lot of, really?
Like I'm self-diagnosed. I go to my doctor in a few months and I'm just like, look, we need to talk about this because it is lining up and it's so different for women in their 30s than it is and guys in their teens.
Well, and it's I feel like there was this big misunderstanding about how ADHD can present. And for me, like seeing TikToks about ADHD kind of made me go like, And then, it's like I had a couple of doctors dismiss it, but I was like, no, like I really want to look into this. And I ended up paying out of pocket to get tested because otherwise I would have to wait like a couple months.
Right.
And I started on medication. It's been great. But, I I mentioned that to say, I see people making TikToks about their ADHD and like, they'll talk a lot about their ADHD, but at the same time, or this girl talks a lot about her jaw surgery, but at the same time, it's like, you don't necessarily see all of the internal thoughts. You don't really know their life, even though there is this like very public outlet.
Yeah. And so my marketing brain's going to turn on for just a second here. Yes. And that's what I think is really fascinating about social media is because it's all selective. Brands and companies and people, entities, they put out what they want you to see. And it's up to them to be as honest and open as they want to be. And like, people are vulnerable on social media for sure, more than they were, back in its inception. But it's times like now where people are more comfortable sharing ADHD diagnosis or, harassment trauma or things like that. And I think that's fascinating that how social media has really opened up conversations, especially with, not to go back to our conversation about the Me Too movement, but it really has created a platform for people to speak out about that.
Yeah, it has. And I think that to tie it back to, Good Charlotte Simple Plan, I think like it really has to be like, it's not right or wrong how introspective you want to be, how personal you want to be, how much you want to talk about your personal relationships, right? Like there's no right or wrong. And you're totally right that some of that is like a branding decision. I think Good Charlotte, I mean, they often talked about how their label would want them to do one thing and they did the opposite. Like after the self-titled, their label wanted a poppier record, so they put out The Young and the Hopeless. After The Young and the Hopeless, their label wanted a poppy record, so they put out Chronicles.
Have you?
Oh, go on.
Oh, just a quick sentence. Have you read Dave Grohl's book, Storyteller?
Mm-mm.
I highly recommend reading it for people who are not even like, you don't have to be fans of Foo Fighters or Nirvana, but if you're fans of music, I highly recommend this book. Like I listened to it on my 10-hour drive back to Kansas over Christmas break. And there are just so many things that like, you don't know that go into decision-making processes for bands. And Nirvana blew up overnight and they had no way to cope with that fame. And so I really recommend people either listening to the audiobook or reading the book. Like it's on my coffee table right now. And like, it is phenomenal just to get that introspection to an industry that people may not know anything about.
Yeah. Thank you. I will totally check that out. I just bought a Kindle, so I will possibly download that for my Kindle.
Yes. it's a great read and it's a great listen. So I recommend that for people who just, and he's a great storyteller. Like we already knew that, but like Dave Grohl's like one of my like loves of life. Like I am obsessed with Foo Fighters.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's a derail.
Yeah. Well, something else I thought of was Simple Plan. I feel like their sound, the words I came up with were not just straightforward, but in some ways their sound was a little more distilled pop punk, especially on this record, and still not getting any. Good Charlotte, their first record, as well as the second, frankly, because listen to, like, if you actually listen to the anthem, you know, I mean, think of all like the hip hop vibes they brought, right? Well, I think Good Charlotte strayed from the path, I guess. Like they were a little more like, okay, we're gonna just do what feels right to us. I feel like for the most part, Simple Plan kind of like knew what they wanted to sound like. Mm-hmm. And they did, like, on the third album, the self-titled, like they kind of experimented a lot, but I don't think that got good reviews, and they kind of went sort of back to, you know, the pop punk sound after that. But something I thought of in terms of like, okay, Simple Plan's sound was a little more straightforward than Good Charlotte's was in some ways. Simple Plan, like, at least Pierre and Chuck were in Reset. They were in like a punk band before, so they had been in a band before. Benji and Joel had not been in a band before Good Charlotte. So probably, I wonder if, like, when Simple Plan was starting out, they were like, okay, we had this band that sounded like this. We're starting a new band. What do we want to sound like?
So I'm going to like say that, but also look at to where they are from. So Good Charlotte's from the DC area, Baltimore area. And like, look at a lot of the influences in there. They were from a very urban area, a very underserved community. So they had a lot of influences that a lot of other bands may not necessarily. There's certainly are bands out there that have a very similar background. So I think that they're pulling in a lot of that inspiration from the area that they grew up in, and the era too. Simple Plan, I'm not as familiar with Canada. I'm sorry, I've only been to Vancouver. Montreal, I don't know if they pulled in a lot of influence from where they were from. Obviously, they had the French Canadian aspect to them. Sure, where that plays a role or how it plays a role. I'm just not very familiar with that culture, and I apologize to all the French Canadians out there.
I really am not too familiar with like the musical kind of culture there. But I do know, like, I had Vanessa Hebert on this show. It was like for Where Would We Be Now? And she's in Montreal. And I if I'm remembering correctly, you know, Vanessa, if you're listening, correct me if I'm wrong. If I remember correctly, she said that a lot of the scene there growing up was like American bands. And you had Simple Plan and Sum 41, but there's definitely a lot of American bands. So I almost wonder if, like, okay, that's, you know, they heard that and were like, okay, let's do something kind of like this.
And that's what I would lean toward as well with my limited knowledge, to say, like, you know, they were pulling from what they knew because it was mainstream. And I think Good Charlotte was pulling from what they knew because it was second nature. Yeah.
And neither is like right or wrong, right? Like, it's just all
absolutely not
backgrounds and what was around them.
It's perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think something I'm also curious about, and I really don't want to spend too much time on this because we easily could.
Yeah.
But, you know, Good Charlotte took a hiatus from 2011 to 2015. And essentially because they felt like the band sort of wasn't theirs and the music industry changed and they didn't really know where they fit. You know, Simple Plan has definitely had times where they slowed down a little on touring. And, you know, it's been over 5 years since their last album, but they just put out a song pretty recently. Mm-hmm. But I don't think Simple Plan ever took any kind of hiatus.
No.
And it's interesting to me that it's like Good Charlotte sort of experimented and they did all those other things and they took a hiatus and then they put out a couple records and toured a bunch. And then now they've been not on hiatus, but they've been quiet again. And I'm like, Simple Plan for the most part has kind of kept doing what they're doing, and they've never, I don't think it's right to say they've never felt the need to take a hiatus. But I, like, you know, they never really officially did, I don't think. And I would like,
I definitely noticed that too. Yeah, I noticed that too, and I think it's just interesting perspective. Like, I don't want to comment too much, but like also look at who and Joel and Bidgie married. They married people within
in the public eye very much
too. And I think that and I think that they really wanted to take a step away from a public eye, and they were all famous in their own rights before they even got together, both couples. And so I just want to say, like, I think that they saw that as a negative way to raise their children. And
that's
so I
really
respect
good point.
That they take a step away. And honestly don't know the names of Simple Plan's, their spouses. You know, so I just want to say it's about perspective.
Pierre's wife, I'm pretty sure, is the same girl he like dated for like forever. And I don't know when
Sebastian and Sebastian was married back in the day. And I don't know if it's this. Yeah, he was married young, and I don't know if it's the same partner or not, but I'm almost positive he was married by the second album.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
I'm almost positive that was a thing. So I just like, it's all about perspective as well. Joel and Benji married very famous women who were talented and in their own right. And I think that especially with Nicole, she had grown up in the public eye. And I think probably they wanted to take a step back and let their children have, you know, out of spotlight lives, which I totally respect.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Yeah, I found this Reddit thread. I don't want to read all the comments, but we'll pick a few. There was a Reddit thread in r/pop punkers, Good Charlotte or Simple Plan. So I will say I tallied the votes. 8 votes for Good Charlotte, 4 for Simple Plan. Absolute zero said that GC's discography runs across the whole spectrum of pop punk, but Generation RX really shows they're maturing in content and technical skill, not resting on past success. Spin 182 says better songs when they experiment a bit more. Jack Lofty said Good Charlotte with both bands would make my top 10. Peanut Butter Sandwich said Good Charlotte, their palette is more diverse and evolved more consistently. Also, their music is still banging today, but they don't pretend they're young anymore. I mean, right, like everyone's kind of saying similar to what we've been saying, right?
It's a pretty interesting spectrum, but I think a lot of people are kind of falling on the same end of it.
Yeah. You know, on the Simple Plan side, Cool Guy 80101 said Simple Plan. I love both bands, but Simple Plan just had that extra good in their songs. Aldino 1026 said their second album, Still Not Getting Any, speaks mostly about what we feel in ourselves, and some of us are afraid to talk or express these feelings. Punky X Brewster said GC has 3 notable songs: Anthem, Lifestyles, and Want to Live, and 2 of those are kind of the same song. SP has a bit more range.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Okay. But and I will say, look, Simple Plan has toured a lot more in the past 12 years. Simple Plan, past 11 years, whatever, Simple Plan has toured a lot more than Good Charlotte has, I think.
I'll also say they probably had more exposure. Like I said, Simple Plan was in like random movies. And you have to think about, like, there's a new era now watching those movies.
That's true. That's true.
So I'm wondering if that has anything to do with the influx of like, I'm gonna say quote unquote popularity or exposure.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I mentioned that Simple Plan has significantly more Spotify monthly listeners than Good Charlotte. 6.4 million versus 4.6 million.
Yeah.
I mean, Simple Plan had a song, I'm Just a Kid, went viral on TikTok like last year or the year before.
Oh my God, yes.
So they have 6.4 million. Good Charlotte has 4.6 million monthly listeners. And I don't think Good Charlotte has had that same virality. Like, they just haven't in recent years. I think it's interesting because this whole, like, you know, new punk, emo kind of new wave is coming out. And I feel like a lot of this, like, emo hip hop, emo rap stuff, I could so easily see Good Charlotte being a major influence. But I don't hear a lot of those artists talking about Good Charlotte. And there hasn't been like a collab recently. So there hasn't been there's like one emo rapper, and
people are gonna probably think that I'm crazy for making this comparison, but Nothing Nowhere kind of has some Good Charlotte vibes to me, and just the terms of the mood that he sets and the mood that and the things that he expresses, like he's just so introspective that he gives me a lot of Good Charlotte vibes in the way that he addresses like his feelings. He's a very shy person. He doesn't like to be photographed, because I did shoot a Nothing Nowhere show, and like he like
I've kind of heard that. Yeah, like you don't really see like his
music videos. Yeah, he kind of keeps this, like he points himself to the side of the stage or behind, like he's back to the crowd, and it's a very interesting thing, but it's also like a vulnerability that like he's
I heard that at Good Charlotte's first couple shows, Joel faced the back.
Yes. And so that's why I'm like, there's a lot of similarities with Nothing Nowhere, so people don't get mad at me for comparing the two.
I could see really it. I only have heard a few songs, but I could totally see it, and I love everything you're saying.
Yeah, no, check out Nothing Nowhere. He's great. He's phenomenal. Like he puts on a hell of a show. Please go see him. Like don't let his shyness deter you.
Yeah. Well, I want to read some reviews of You Don't Mean Anything.
Let's get into it.
So like there was one that was pretty good, but of these reviews, for the most part, they're bad. Most people did not like this song. Modern Fix, this is the first one I'll read. They said that You Don't Mean Anything is a self-esteem riser of the year. Very well done. Easter in the Batcave, a user on Rate Your Music, gave this a headline. This album is like eating live chipmunks. No fun for you. No fun for the chipmunks. And there's like several paragraphs, but I'm going to kind of skip around. Anyway, this album is just plain awful. From the title to the music to the lyrics, this is just a bad, bad album. There are a couple of bright spots here and there, but they are diamonds in the rough. But why is this band so bad, you say? Surely they can't be as bad as giving birth, having your feet stapled to a piece of cardboard, and watching the Brady Bunch Variety Hour all at the same time. But yes, I assure you, it's as bad as that. Here's a quick breakdown of why this album is so awful. And then lists several reasons why this album is so awful. Number 5 was the lyrics. For God's sake, you don't mean anything to me. You don't mean anything to me. You're what I never want to be. And then number 1, the final reason was Pierre's voice. The only song in which it sounds remotely good is You Don't Mean Anything. It's insanely annoying, high, and ridiculously
I understand what this person's saying. I really, really do. But like I said back at the very beginning of this, it's a simple song. I don't think that needs to be taken away from the meaning of it. And so
we've talked about that with a lot of the GC songs too, right? Especially on the first couple of records. Some of them are simple. Doesn't mean they're not good songs.
Right. And so, I mean, while I respect this critic's decision, I'm also just like, just also like when you criticize anything, play devil's advocate with yourself.
Yeah.
And that's my marketing brain. Like my marketing brain turns on a lot. So like play devil's advocate with yourself a lot more than what you think. Like you'd be like, oh, this maybe just sucks. Okay, well, why did it suck? This, and this. But also, was good. Or this, like, I read this book that I hated, but everybody loved. And I was like, y'all, I don't get why you loved it. I see some things, but it just did not do it for me. And people are like, no, you're wrong. And I was like, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Perspective.
Yeah. I really want to get into this piece from IGN. It looks like this piece, it was not like a straightforward review so much as someone listened to it a little bit after it came out. I don't care how much of a connoisseur of fine music you may claim to be. Sometimes you just want to cast all pretensions aside and kick back with a disc full of silly, dumb, largely inconsequential tunes. But I was ready to accept, the challenge of this album, but could I ever adequately prepare myself to listen to music specifically designed to eject the soul with 500 cc's of raw? I would find my answer soon enough. My friends considered my request and unanimously recommended the musical opus No Pads, No Helmets, No Just Balls by Simple Plan. They chuckled heartily, probably because it just feels good to help out a pal in need. The darkest depths of my soul were being unceremoniously dredged by this sinister band from hell, a feeling only reinforced by the confrontational title of the disc's third track, You Don't Mean Anything. It was almost as if I was being challenged, nay, dared to proceed. I don't know how I managed, but proceed I did. As I headed into the home stretch, I felt like a mental patient. I would never forgive my friends for putting me through this agony.
Oh, that's funny.
What's funny to me about that is like clearly this person like has some issues, and I'm like, maybe if you had an open mind, you could actually get something like really positive and relatable from this album.
I mean, like, I was listening through it and My Alien, and I was just like, it's a dumb song. Like, I think surface of it,
My Alien is kind of a, knowing they're such big Blink fans, I feel like that's almost a very direct way of doing their version of Aliens Exist.
Or Another Girl, Another Planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for me, I was just like listening to this. There's some like heart in that song if you really think about it. It's like, when are you coming home? Like,
yeah,
you know, I just want to be near you. It's a love song. It's not just like a, oh, I'm dating an alien. It's like, no, and if you think about it in practicality, it's like a person that's foreign to the music industry, probably.
Yeah. It's also like,
so I'm just like, and so I'm just like,
it's My Alien is also kind of like Riot Girl by Good Charlotte.
Yes.
It's like Josie by Blink-182. You know, it's like singing about this perfect girl that doesn't exist.
Exactly. And so I think that when people like get to songs like that, they're just like, this is so stupid. Why am I listening to this album? Like, this album is not serious. This band is not serious. And I'm just like, your life can't be taken so seriously. There are times you need to be serious in life, but like, it's like this album, it's fun. It doesn't need to be serious, and there are serious songs, but like, that's not the point of it.
You don't have to think seriously. I feel like if this person stopped thinking so seriously about this album, he could appreciate how serious this album is. Does that make any sense?
No, I totally agree. And like, there's fun in it, but there's also heart in it.
And if you're so serious about this is a stupid album, you're not going to appreciate like the heart and the good stuff.
No, not at all.
Well, let's read some comments from songmeanings.com. Bouncing Soul 1440 said, "This is me, the person you can't walk away from, but you really want to. Ah, amazing group. Just wish they'd be less wussy emo." Claire B 711 said, "SP rocks and this song kicks. It totally reminds me of an ex-boyfriend, Reed Dick, of mine, and this song is like way empowering."
Which is what we said earlier.
Exactly. Spider Girl said, "This is the song I listen to when I'm pissed off and I can't get something off of my mind. It helps because I just picture myself yelling the lyrics as I drive by whoever's making me mad." I Wanna Riot said, "I love this song. When listening to it, I wish you could hear Joel's voice a little more, but besides that, it's an awesome song." I'll read two more. Pinky0721 said, "This is a pretty cool song. Just don't listen to Simple Plan too much. They get really lame and start sounding like Blink."
Oh.
And then final one we'll read from here. Bowling for Soup 89 said, "I felt like this is what I have been searching to say to people at school. I mean, they all think I am trying to be like them, and they try to enforce that on me. I sang this song for my talent show. I think they got the point." You know what? Bowling for Soup 89, I love that for you. And if you're listening to this, I hope you can like send me a video of your talent show performance.
Yes.
Incredible.
Yes. I love it.
Let's read a couple Amazon like customer reviews.
The best section to get reviews.
Yes. Matt Redmond said, "Awesome," and gave the album 5 out of 5. Gave You Don't Mean Anything 10 out of 10. Said, "Very fun, quite repetitive, yes, but it is a lot of fun still." Caramel said, "It's the best pop punk I've ever heard. 5 out of 5. That they got it nearly spot on. My only complaint is perhaps a few samey moments, but that doesn't stop it lifting your spirits in small doses." And about this song, Caramel said, I'm guessing this dude is singing about his parents here, or maybe it's someone else trying to change how he is. This is an awesome individuality anthem. Katie said, okay, debut CD, gave the album 3 out of 5 and this song 8 out of 10. Chorus can get a little bit annoying, and I don't see what's the point of having Joel Madden on it when you can barely hear him, but a good song in general. Eat Mize Schwartz said, what kind of shit is this? Gave the album 1 out of 5. If you really think about it, Simple Plan is just Blink-182 or MXPX at 25, just acting like they're 14. Still, Simple Plan's lyrics even sound like they're written by a 13-year-old. Words, phrases like worst ever are used over and over about the first 15 seconds of the worst day ever and don't mean anything sound identical. Speaking of age, I don't really trust any band that's fan base is pushing high school. Okay.
Yeah, high school is like when you want to get your fans because they're more likely to become lifelongers. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One more we'll read from song meanings. Play X Crack X the X Sky. Called it bubblegum punk, gave the album 2 out of 5, and said that this song is great song. Again, it's catchy. It's all about teen angst, and you'll fall in love with it immediately. YouTube comments. Lovely Doll Time. We'll just read a few. Lovely Doll Time said, this is my message to all of my haters. Good. Good.
Yes.
Gabsy said, how come I never noticed Joel was there? No wonder why this song feels so much GC. And finally, Tony Velachos fan said, this is essentially Bully Will Not Ruin My Self-Esteem, the song. True.
You're not wrong.
Well, Ashleigh, how has You Don't Mean Anything held up for you over time?
Like looking back on it, it definitely feels like a middle schooler song. So there's some sentiment here that does ring a little bit true. So, I have to remember the lens that I was listening to this in a time period and what was going on in the world and what was going on in my world.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I think it holds up really well. I mean, there's still sentiments there that people can really focus on, especially like we said, sticking it to the man. So whatever man in your life that you want to stick it to, I think that this could be a good anthem for that.
Yeah. I think I've really come to appreciate this song, and like whether it's like sticking it to a bully or like anyone trying to knock you down at work, I really have come to appreciate, even honestly, especially over the past few days, that I've come to appreciate that interpretation of the song.
Yeah. And like I said, we're in a generation now where we won't like just put our heads down and keep going. We're going to be the ones that cause a ruckus and make a change. So yeah. I think this is a really good song to keep in mind if you're feeling down about the change that you're trying to make. Totally.
Well, what have Simple Plan and Good Charlotte meant to you over the years, and how has that changed?
They both represented a time in my life that was like I could express myself without having to express myself, if that makes sense. Like
express yourself by listening to them.
Yeah. And like I said, I grew up in a really rural community, and it was like country or top 40, and pop punk and emo wasn't really a thing. And I got bullied a lot for just liking Simple Plan and Good Charlotte, and I will never apologize. So F the haters. It's like one of those things. But so for me, it represents a constant. It's a comfort zone almost, where I can go back and be like, this was the time in my life where I didn't have an escape, but they were my escape. And so I'm very thankful for them in this era. So for me, it's maintained itself as a constant for me, but it's also allowed me to grow, with the mindset of saying, okay, you don't have to be just another face in the crowd. You can be whomever you want, and you can do whatever you want.
Amazing. Yeah. That's it. That's it really. Do you have any last words about You Don't Mean Anything, about Simple Plan, about Good Charlotte, or about yourself?
I just think music's going to stand the test of time, and don't ever be afraid or ashamed of the type of music you listen to, because ultimately it's fine. Like I have this weird obsession with Post Malone. like, he's just so fascinating. I can't look away from him. And so I saw him, he played in Kansas City the day of the Chiefs Super Bowl parade in 2020. And he like wore a Chiefs jersey, and he,
oh my God,
like noticed, like he's known to be a Cowboys fan because his dad used to work for the Cowboys. And so just like having that sentiment, it's like, I like didn't feel ashamed to love Post Malone at that moment. So it's like, don't be ashamed of music that you love. Like it's yours and yours alone. Don't let anybody ever run away from you.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Ashleigh, so I always do a Generation GC and Friends Spotify playlist. So I'm going to put the song that we talked about, and which is You Don't Mean Anything by Simple Plan. And then I would love to just get a recommendation from you of anything you're listening to lately that's not Good Charlotte or Simple Plan.
Oh gosh. My friend compiled like this giant playlist for me so I could listen to on my drive. And there's a lot of good stuff on there. Let me put my library real quick. I've been revisiting the XX a lot. They haven't produced anything in a while, but I've always loved them. One that people might be like, oh, why are you listening to this? Is Dua Lipa. I love her. And then just kind of the two bands I did get to see this past year was the Black Keys and Group Love. So I've just been kind of listening to them just as a, yes, they played a free show here at the university, and like I was probably the oldest person in that crowd. I was like, I'm gonna fight these kids for a spot here.
Yeah.
So I've been like listening to those just from nostalgia purposes, and just there's some fun stuff in there too. So like I said, don't be ashamed of your music variety, and like don't stick to one genre. If you like something out of another genre, run with it.
Absolutely. Well, Ashleigh, two more things before we wrap up.
Yeah.
I like to ask my guests for a charity that they really believe in, so we can encourage listeners to donate. So what's a charity organization that you would like to encourage people listening to this to support?
So the first one that really comes to mind is the Victory Project in Kansas City. It is Sporting Kansas City. It's our MLS team. It is their charity organization. And through that, they help kind of create an initiative to help kids with all challenges. So they work a lot with our children's hospital back in KC called Children's Mercy Hospital. And they just help with community involvement, getting kids involved in sports, especially those with childhood cancer. That's one of my favorite ones. Yeah, that's like one of the best ones. There's a special seat for a child at the hospital to sit at our stadium. And then like before every game, they introduce the kid and we like do this big clap with their name. So if their name is like Jordan, we go, Jordan.
Oh, that's for, like, so cool.
Minute. And like they get a special jersey and then like this special seat. It is like, it gives me chills thinking about it.
That's so special.
Yeah. It's the Victory Project in Kansas City. They are like one of my favorites. They do a lot of great stuff. That's so cool.
And I really love that you mentioned something that's it sounds like a very local thing. And
yes,
you know, not everyone listening to this is anywhere near Kansas City, but
nope.
I think everyone can appreciate, you know, wanting to really, really directly support an organization that's doing the work.
Yeah. And I don't live in Kansas City right now. Right. I have plans to move back in a couple of years after I finish this PhD program. But KC is like, you know, we talk a lot about finding a home and finding identity. And like, I grew up, 4 hours away from Kansas City in a small town, and Kansas City and Lawrence were the two places that I really felt at home with. So I claim those as my hometowns now. And so, and I encourage people out there too listening, if you don't have a home, like if your home is not your home, I encourage you to find a place that feels like it, because it doesn't have to be where you're born. It's just where you feel the best at your best self at.
Totally. Ashleigh, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about the good old days because I don't get to talk about it very often.
Yeah, this was really fun. As we head out, if people want to keep up with you, I mean, do you want to share your social media or if you have a website or anything?
Yes. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at @AshSmash18.
Perfect.
I've had those handles like since high school. I have a corgi, so most of my pictures now are just of my corgi instead of concerts, which is sad.
Oh my God.
Her name
I
is
love
Nugget. She makes an appearance. Yeah, go say hey to Nugget.
Oh my God.
She would love you guys forever. And then a lot of it is sports because, you know, that is what I'm studying now.
Yeah.
But I'm always happy to talk concerts. And if you guys are down in the Mississippi area, let me know because there's some good towns not too far away. It's a couple hours drive that are always having good concerts. And I'm willing to travel for a good show.
Amazing. Ashleigh, thank you for coming on. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. Last time we talked about sex on the radio from Cardiology. On our next episode, we'll be talking about a song from Youth Authority. My name is Molly Hudelson. Once again, and as always, I am your host, as well as the producer, creator, and editor of this podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and please make sure to follow Generation GC or subscribe on your preferred podcast provider. You can rate and review on Apple Podcasts, and you can now also rate on Spotify. That really helps. Most importantly, please keep spreading the word. Follow Generation GC at Generation GC Pod, POD, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And you can follow me, Molly, at M Hudelson, MHUDELSON, on Twitter and Instagram. Please keep listening, keep telling your friends, and let's make the Generation GC fam get bigger and better.